can't help but think about this past year at Unite. I don't know when you started coming to Unite. It could have been in the beginning of the year, or years ago, or maybe you just started. But to think back, and maybe that's what I want you to do tonight a little bit while I'm speaking, is just to think back a little bit of those highs and the lows that you have been through. I'm not going to even pretend to imagine some of the lows you guys have been through, even as an adult. I mean, students, man, there are some things y'all go through that I will never experience. And I'm not going to try to do that, but to know that God is faithful through that. To know that you're still sitting here today on our last semester, or last Unite of the semester, and God is still good. He is still the same since the beginning. He was still the same when you're at your lowest point. He was the same at your highest point. That's a God that I want to serve. So we are ending our series. Well, hold on. First of all, you guys excited for summer? Come on, that's what I'm saying. You guys excited for Unite to end? I was hoping like, boo, whatever. Yeah, that's right. It's all right. We are going to be meeting up in the summer. You're going to get a little schedule of some summer events that we're going to be doing. There are a couple others that are not on there, but we'll keep you updated on that. And then we'll start back up in August. So we're going to see each other. But truly, thank you guys for being a part of this. Thank you for being a part of what God's doing here at Unite at CFCC. So we started this series, What Would Jesus Do? You guys have heard that before. What Would Jesus Do? WWJD has a lot of bracelets. Anyway, today is going to be the last day that we talk about the last part of the series, and we're going to talk about how Jesus would serve us. And I think it's really important, especially for this being the last Unite, and this watching Jesus, learning more about who he is. I've been saying it since the beginning. I don't want us to be a body of students or leaders that are soaking up maybe what Jesus is saying from God's word, soaking up whatever we're saying up here and leaving the same person. I want us to be able to leave those doors changed. Leave those doors looking more like Jesus. That's my prayer. That's my hope, that we don't stay the same person that we are. And that kind of sounds offensive because God created you in a unique way, and I love that. And the leaders love that. And we can build on that with the grace of Jesus by looking more like him. And that's why we're going through this series. And so as we're talking about serving, there's this saying of like climbing the ladder of success. You guys have heard that before? Who's heard that? Like you climb the ladder of success. You want to get higher and better at everything you're doing, or maybe something specific. Well, I remember speaking of ladders, I've probably told you this before, but I worked at a file storage company when I was just getting out of high school or going into college. And my job was to store files. I mean, look at that. And they were in these huge boxes, and these boxes weighed 50 to 100 pounds. I don't like heights. You know, who's with me on that? I'm not fond of heights. And I mean, I feel like I got used to it just a little bit when I started working there, but still not like the greatest with heights. But I would have to walk up the ladder, and where it says, do not step, I had to step every time. They're like, no, you're going to be stepping on that. I mean, if like, what is it, HIPAA, if they came in, is it HIPAA? They come in and they see me, it'd be horrible. But I have to walk up this ladder with this 50 to 100 pound box of files that are very important files. A lot of like people's wills are in there. And I got to go up one hand at a time and get to the very top and then put it up. And it scared the heck out of me. And when I was writing this message, I thought about that time in college because that was so heavy. I carried this weight on my shoulders, climbing up this ladder so many times a day. And I'm telling you, I was so nervous, I'd be sweating. I mean, from the first box, I'd be sweating because I was so nervous. Not just because it was heavy, but I was so scared of heights. And it made me think about how culture today, or people in society, or people around us all the time are saying, you need to climb this ladder of success. You need to be the best at what you do. You have to have the most followers so people can pay you or serve you, so you can make the most money. You have the nicest car, the nicest house, and that's the thing that culture and society is telling us to chase after. And I don't want us to get this wrong, because I believe that we should work hard at everything we do. I believe the hardest workers in this world should be followers of Christ, because we're working for something more, and that's for Jesus. In everything that we do, I believe that we should always strive towards that and be the best that we can be. But if that's our main focus, what culture is telling us, you're going to get to a point where you're going to either crash or you're not going to get any higher, and you're not going to be fulfilled. And so life tells us that we need to step it up, go up this ladder constantly. And I don't know if you felt that way. I don't know if you've ever felt that pressure on you, whether it's from friends or parents or bosses, whatever that may be, but that's what culture tells us. And when we talk about what would Jesus do in this whole series, there's this common theme in every part that we talked about. Whether it was he would love us first, he would do the Father's will, he would meet us in our mess, he would serve us. This common thing is that whatever Jesus does, culture says to do the opposite. And maybe you've realized that when we talk about these on Sunday nights, that culture is saying to do something else, while Jesus is saying, no, this is the way to live. This is the way to life. So we talk about how Jesus would serve us. If you have a Bible or a Bible app, turn with me to John chapter 13, verse 1 to 17. I'm going to try to make this a little quick, because we have some stuff to do at the end, but I really want you to pay attention tonight. I really want us to leave understanding a little bit more of what God's trying to tell us before we go off into the summer. So John chapter 13, verse 1 to 17. Well, before I get into that, I want to talk about the context of what's going on, okay? What's going on here? So Jesus meets privately with his disciples in Jerusalem to celebrate a Passover meal. You might have seen the picture of there it is. You guys seen this picture before? Of the Last Supper. So they sit around a U-shaped table, and the table's usually around 6 to 8 inches above the ground. So they don't have chairs. They're kind of like leaning on their side a little bit. Probably hurt their backs. It hurt my back. I don't know if it hurt your back, but it probably hurt their back. Imagine they doing that every day. That would hurt. But this meal is a special one, because it's the last Passover meal that Jesus will have on earth. So this is more than a meal. Jesus knows he's about to be the Passover lamb who will be slain once and for all for the forgiveness of the world. And he chooses to eat with his disciples before his death. And so this is where we pick up. It says this in verse 1. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, he took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to wash his disciples' feet. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" And Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." And Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." And Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you are." He's talking about Judas. For he knew who was going to betray him. And that was why he said, "Not every one of you was clean." When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. I'm going to stop right there. So there's a lot in this passage, okay? And there's a lot that we can cover. But what I want to focus on today is just that act of Jesus washing the feet of his disciples. So we first have to talk about the significance of that, because some of you guys got some nasty feet. So picture this in your head. Picture this in your head. The disciples and Jesus are walking all over town. Now, they got no cars, they don't have buggies, they don't have bicycles to get from place to place. So everywhere they went, they traveled by foot, either with sandals or barefoot. And so having clean feet when walking into a home was very customary, and someone would have to clean them, though. A lot of times, Back in those days, there were these basins of water that we put out on the doorstep. And what would happen is a servant would come and clean them off. Or a servant would take a towel before you eat your meal and clean them off with a towel. And it would also save people from the embarrassment of getting nasty feet on the people's rugs. So it was the lowliest job in this culture to wash someone's feet. It wasn't even Jewish slaves, it was Gentile slaves that were doing this washing. So going back to the disciples' feet, they had to be gross. But they all sat at the table with their dirty feet, and they neglected to do anything about it. And it's very coincidental that right before this moment, I forgot to add before, they were arguing about who was the greatest. They were saying, Jesus, who's going to sit at your right hand? Who's going to sit next to you? And everyone's like, I'm the greatest, or I'm the greatest. So I can only imagine that none of them were going to step up to wash each other's feet, right? After that argument and that conversation. Someone should have at least offered to wash Jesus' feet, the Messiah, their leader, their rabbi, their teacher. But no, that would have been too humiliating for them, right? To wash someone's feet wasn't just a lowly job, but it was a humble posture. And they all come in with their dirty feet, about to eat their last meal, when Jesus does something that none of them expected. And so going back to the passage, I love how John first started this passage with the love that Jesus has for us. Having loved his own who are in the world, he loved them to the end. And so he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. Look how significant this is. Jesus laid down the one thing on his body that identified him as a rabbi or as a teacher. That was his robe. He took an identity that was his life and he laid it down and clothed himself in the identity of a servant, which is foreshadowing in a little bit Jesus' death on a cross, where he will lay down his life for all of us, for all people, so that we can be saved. And he begins to wash their feet. And then he gets to Peter, who is notorious for having this big mouth, which I love Peter, because I could have a big mouth too. Peter starts to realize what Jesus is doing. He's like, are you about to wash my feet? That can't happen. And he goes a little further and goes, Jesus, that will never happen. You shall never wash my feet. And then Jesus says, well, then you have no part with me. And then he swings to the opposite side, and he's like, well, scrub me down, head to toe, Jesus. Scrub me down. And I can't imagine, though, what they were thinking. That this is happening right after this argument on who is the greatest, who is going to sit next to Jesus at the table. And their master takes the lowly position, yet humble position, in washing their feet. He chose to do the job. He chose to do the dirty work for us, when his disciples should have been the ones to do it. And this is where it really gets me. The greatest, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the one that they know as Messiah, humbly goes before them to love and to serve them. He washes everyone's feet, even Judas's. Back in verse 1, it says Jesus knew. Now, they were talking specifically about Jesus knew the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. When it says Jesus knew, Jesus is sovereign over all things. He knows past, present, future. He knew when walking into that room that there was an enemy in the room, that his close friend, his close disciple is about to betray him, is about to trade Jesus' life for a little bit of money. Jesus knew before going into there, he was going to wash their feet. Jesus knew before going into there, though, that his enemy was sitting in those seats, and he was going to wash his feet. Judas had the plan already in place, and I can only imagine being in the position of Judas, knowing what's about to happen, that his loving Father, the loving hands of Jesus, is touching his feet. So Jesus not only loves his enemy, but humbly serves them, even the ones that reject him. So later in this meal, which is not in this passage, Jesus tells the disciples that displaying this humble, self-sacrificing love is how people will recognize his followers. A new command I give you, he says, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Jesus isn't saying, now go wash everyone's feet. He's saying, now go love people by putting them and others above yourselves. So the purpose of life is what he's telling us is not to climb up this ladder, but to climb down the ladder. And then it ends with this. Do you understand what I've done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is his messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. So how? What does that look like to wash the feet of others? And this lesson is simple. Jesus is the teacher. His students are not greater than he is, and we are to do as he does. I know in our culture, we don't wash each other's feet necessarily. Like I said, nasty feet. But Jesus calls us not to a single act. He calls us into a lifestyle and an attitude change towards others. That's the example that he's given us. He's calling us to a lifestyle change that will affect the people around us, that will affect our circles that we run in, our families, our friends, the people in our school, whatever that may look like where you are on a daily basis. Do you believe that you can affect people in that way? That's what I want to ask you guys. Do you believe that? That's a tough thing to answer sometimes. For so much of my life, that was so hard for me to answer. To do as Jesus did, the author and perfecter of my life, there's no way I can live up to that. But you see, for so long, we've measured greatness by how much we can achieve. I don't know if that's you. And maybe for so long we measured greatness by how many people must do what we say, by our following on Instagram, by our views on TikTok. It's not like a youth pastor saying that. But Jesus, he uses a different metric. In the kingdom of God, greatness is measured by how many people we serve, by how we humbly take a lowly position before others. And that requires a great deal of humility. That's something that doesn't come easy to many of us, if not all of us. But going back to our many messages outside of the WWJD series that we spoke about this year, Jesus served so many people. He gave examples, so many examples that we've talked about, and beyond that, Jesus touched the ones who no one else touched. That was the leper. Jesus cared for the ones who no one else cared for, the woman who touched his robe. Jesus didn't shame others, but loved them when no one else did, the woman at the well. Jesus saw more in people than they even saw in themselves, those disciples that were following him. He didn't mock, he didn't gossip, he didn't hurt, he didn't ridicule, and he forgave. And he forgave more than the customary number of forgiveness, which was 3, and then Peter said 7, or 70 times 7, which Jesus said he forgave an unlimited amount of forgiveness by dying on a cross for you and me. And unforgiveness, that's something that requires so much humility on our part. A step that's so hard to take. Jesus washed the feet of his disciples. And that was just also symbolic to the way he washed the people's feet that I just talked about, the way that he served them. It was symbolic to him laying his life on the cross for us. Know this. So I want you to be encouraged tonight. And as I wrap up, I'm going to have Tillman come up here. Jesus serves you when you reject him. He serves you when you're filled with shame. He serves you when you go against him. He serves you when you doubt him. He serves you when you get sucked into temptation. If he washes the feet of Judas, thank God he is washing my feet too. And he is washing your feet. And these are a couple of questions that I want to, because again, going back to us leaving here different, leaving here challenged, these are some of the questions you're going to go over in your breakout group. But what does it look like for you to serve others? What does it look like to wash the feet of others in your context? Because it's different for everybody. When someone is hurting, what would our Jesus do? When someone is talking about someone else, what would Jesus do? When someone messed up and they're feeling horrible about themselves and they're filled with shame, what would Jesus do? Let me go back to that first one, that he would love first. I love that because it kind of covers this whole range of things. And going back to that verse that I said before, where is it? There's a new command I give you, to love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. And by this, everyone will know that you're my disciples. Everyone will see that you are a follower of Jesus by the way that you love, by the way that you serve, by the way that you do the Father's will, by the way that you meet them in their mess. It's a hard thing, it's a humbling thing to do, but we believe in you guys. We need a generation that steps up and will be more like Jesus rather than be more like culture. We'll be more of walking down the steps rather than walking up this ladder to try to be the best, try to have the most followers. By the way that you love, by the way that you serve people, will show that you are a disciple of Jesus, and God will recognize that you are his disciple. So again, I want us to leave with a different mindset, but also walking in this. You have people around you that will support, that will rally around you, that love you so much, that will help you through this. Let's be followers of Christ who love and serve others and put them first. And I know it'll look perfect. It'll look imperfect. Oof, it will not look perfect. It'll look so imperfect. And that's okay. God doesn't call us to perfection because he is perfection.